this computer.
There we go.
Sweet. All right, folks, welcome to another GD podcast. I'm your host, Guy DeMarco. This week we have Robert Davis, a former Air Force service member, not only a service member, but also a member of the Air Force shooting team. So some of his accomplishments, they're lengthy, so I'm going to read them so I don't mess these up. He is an international Olympic rifle competitor for both small bore and air rifle. He was the captain of the Air Force shooting team. He was the three-time advanced graduate of the Rogers Shooting School. He was top marksman awardee at FLETC, which is the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. Air Force record holder for the 300-meter rapid fire kneeling and prone discipline. Two-time Belgian Master of Flanders prone competition. He was the first American to qualify for the German National Air Rifle Championships. Senior shooting coach for the Air Force Wounded Warrior Program, and many, many more. So that's quite a resume, Robert. So go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on. Robert Davis, and I'm originally from Garland, Texas, home of scandalous country star LeAnn Rimes, and also what the cartoon show King of the Hill was essentially based on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, they called it Arlen in the show, but it's a combination of a city called Arlington, also in the DFW Metroplex, and Garland. But Mike Judge grew up in Garland, so that's what he based it on. And my dad's lawn was always in a constant state of readiness, indeed. So not anymore, unfortunately, but yeah. And yeah, I did 21 years in the Air Force.
Okay.
And retired now almost 2 years.
Okay.
It's gone by quick. And now I'm working in the finance world and doing that, but I'm still involved with the Air Force Wounded Warrior Program. And I also work for a movie theater chain doing some contract work for them as well as a movie party host.
Movie party host.
Yeah.
That's a new one. I haven't heard of something like that.
Yeah.
So from Texas, brothers, sisters?
No, only child.
Only child. Okay. So as an only child, what was childhood like? Like growing up in Texas, we're probably close to the same age. Growing up in Texas in the 80s and 90s. Probably a bunch of cowboy boots, belt buckles, and baseball caps, right?
Not really. I mean, I found some pictures of me when I was little with some cowboy boots, and I think at one point, yeah, I did have like a stereotypical Texas belt buckle when I was like, very small. But yeah, my family we really weren't into any of that. So, and
Okay.
I've never been a big cap wearer. So, in fact, one time when I was in Germany, I was talking to we used to have these, which I'll talk about, OSI in a little bit, but we used to have, or as part of the organization, you have these liaison meets
Okay.
and dinners, especially like when you're international, you bring in other police forces and other government agencies and stuff that you work with, just to have like a liaison party, just to keep relationships up well. And one of the German guys, I don't remember where in the government he worked, but he was a younger guy, about my age at the time, and he goes, "I don't understand you Americans. You always are wearing the baseball caps. You need to show you have the good hair. You need to show it." Because he had like really big hair, and that kind of stuck with me. I'm like, yeah, if you got hair, show it, But no, I haven't really ever been big on baseball caps myself.
Okay.
Um, yeah. Although lately I'm becoming like an old man when I go shoot. I bought one of those giant farmer
Yeah,
hats.
big farmer hat.
Yeah, because I'm like
Absolutely.
I'm tired of getting burned, man. I'm just
Oh
tired of
yeah.
it. So for coolness, I'll do it when I'm shooting, and I'll take it off, or I'll do it when I'm not shooting, and then when I'm shooting for the videos and stuff like that, I'll take it off real quick.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
Um, was there any significant events in your childhood that you feel kind of formed the man that you are today?
Probably going to see lots of action movies in the 80s. And I
Okay.
think that kind of got me on a trajectory that, I want to go in the military at some point and do that. And also, it's really formed my love of movies. Hence why I'm a movie party host. I'm very big into cinema and especially home cinema.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So, like, when you say home cinema, are you meaning like home movie theaters or like the production of cinema?
Well, that too. I
Okay.
was lucky back in 2008. I got to go be an extra in a Matt Damon movie called Green Zone.
Oh,
They were
wow.
they were
Love
desperately
that
looking
movie.
for Americans. I was working a fraud. It was a TDY to Ramstein for 6 months of deployment, essentially, right?
Yeah.
I was a Spangdahlem at the time, and they sent out a call to some of the other agents I was working with that had come from England because those agents had been extras on the Bourne Ultimatum,
Oh,
the
okay. Yeah,
Bourne
yeah, yeah.
Identity, and all that. And that same production company had reached back out to Americans that were living in, I guess the Lake and Heath area at the time, says, "Hey, we desperately need Americans to come to Morocco to be extras to play American soldiers in this
Oh
movie."
no.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no one else could do it. No one else ended up leave, and I was like, they're never going to let me leave this task force to do this. But that was when I realized, like, as long as you got a good supervisor, the
Oh
power of
yeah.
leave is pretty strong. Like, well, we really can't deny you leave. You've done a good job here. So 2 days later, I was out to Morocco for 2 weeks, shooting with Matt Damon and Paul Greengrass and Brendan Gleeson, who I guess he won the Oscar a year or two ago for Best Supporting Actor. So
Dude, that's awesome.
um, yeah, it was. So that part for me, like being a big movie buff, to actually see how a movie's made, it was amazing. It was a wonderful experience.
That's super cool.
Yeah,
So
but to back up, oh sorry,
no, I super love movies too. Like I not only like the story or the plot, but also like the cinematography that goes into it and things like that. Like, um, so my mom used to like work part-time in a couple of movie stores growing up back when it was like VHS tapes and stuff. So like, um, there's this one spot around the corner from our house is called Mr. Movie, and she would give her all the movies, and she would have us watch some of the action movies and like the kids movies, and then be like, "Hey, how many do you think I need to order for the store so that like when this comes out?" So we'd always get to like see the previews of the movies before,
you were
like
a
they
test group.
yeah, so we were like the test group for this little local movie store. So I used to get there, get to see like all the movies before they would come out and be like, "Oh, this one was super cool. This was a really cool part." And now I'm not saying like she made her the business owner made their business decisions based on what we said, but she had a couple different people that she would take their input. But like the kids movies and like so I've seen a ton of the 80s and 90s, late 90s movies for like specifically for kids, like Escape from Witch Mountain, and
Yeah.
Sandlot, and like all those kind of movies, like the feel good kids movies. Like we got to watch all those like when we were kids growing up, so like 80s kids movies are super nostalgic for me.
Oh yeah, oh, that's really great, and it's the same. Like my mom was taking me to movies all the time when I was little, and it really wasn't. You asked for like a point in time. It really wasn't until Terminator 2 that I really fell in love with movies. I mean, I like movies, but Terminator 2, my mom took me to see that 9 times, and I
Oh
love it to
wow.
this day. And that extends now, to kind of go back to answer your first question, but the house we have is almost like a shrine to cinema. So I have a life-size Terminator in the other room,
Nice.
the endoskeleton with the two guns and all that, and just put up well, it's pretty large. It's a 6 scale bat wing from the 1989 Batman. It's suspended over the walkway as you walk into the house, and
Oh, that's so cool.
um, yeah, I've got the T1000 from Terminator 2 when he's all frozen and his arms or his hands broken off, life size. So I've got tons and tons of movie collectibles, but for the home cinema piece, yeah, I'm very serious about that too. It's not just like, oh yeah, I got a big TV. It's like, no, I have a 150-inch scope screen. I've got one of 25 projectors JVC made for their flagship model. It's 8K laser projector. I've got now 11 speakers, 4 subwoofers. I've got D-box motion seats, so you can actually like feel the action
Dude,
for
that's
movies.
awesome. Now
Yeah,
that's
so
a home movie theater.
yeah.
That's
Now it's
super
not
cool.
finished. It's so close to being finished, and like throughout my career, even like when I was in college, I'd always build a little bit, but I'd always
Right.
add something. So it's not like I just I'm super rich or something like that, and I just build all this overnight. It's like it's been
Oh
interim
yeah.
steps all along the way. Now it's kind of like I'm at that point in my life where it's the pinnacle, right? Like everything kind of
Yeah.
comes together, and here it goes.
I mean,
But I'm still
that's
waiting
just
on
like shooting stuff. Like you don't go out and like
yeah.
have, all the fancy gadgets and gadgets. And I mean, like it took me years to get an A&D powder drop. Like it took me years to get that.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I mean, I still got my RCBS right there as a trusty backup, but like, yeah, like that stuff doesn't come to you overnight. It takes a very long time to acquire some of the things that we've got, whether it
It
be
does,
in cinema or in our other hobby. Yeah, that's super
but it makes you
cool.
appreciate it more, though.
Oh
As
yeah,
you're able to build up to it. Because if you just get all right away, like you don't take it for or you take it
you
for
don't
granted. But
understand the intrinsic value of
yeah,
of the item. Sweet. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. That's super cool. I didn't think of cinema in that way of like building over time and like the extent that people go in their home movie in their movie watching. I love it.
yeah.
So you said you were in the Air Force. So what led you to the Air Force?
Well, my dad was in the Air Force for 4 years,
Okay.
right as Vietnam was kicking off. He didn't go to Vietnam because his time was up by that point, and I guess they weren't pulling recent separatees or whatever to come
Yeah.
back to active duty. But he had told me at the time that his understanding of the services was based on food, which I guess speaks to my dad, that he liked food. But he's like, the Air Force has the best food, the Navy has the second best food, the Marines are the third best, and the Army is the worst. So
I mean, that's
he
that's a
was
fair characterization.
yeah. So he was okay with me going to the Air Force, potentially the Navy, but after that, he's like, the food's not so good. You're not going to be eating well.
Okay.
Um,
So
so that
did you really look at other branches or were you kind of like dead set on the Air Force?
yeah, I thought the Air Force was cool. I saw Iron Eagle when I was a kid. And I was like,
Oh,
oh, the Air
yep.
Force is doing cool
Another
stuff.
classic. Another
Yeah.
classic movie.
So for me, like that trajectory seemed interesting, and it was neat too. Like coming out of high school, I got a scholarship through Air Force ROTC,
Okay.
and actually I was trying to go for the academy, and I'm kind of glad that I didn't. $1 million education, a nickel at a time, as they say now. But um, I got a nomination to West Point instead, and I hadn't applied to West Point, and I didn't really want to go there, so I turned that down and just used a ROTC scholarship.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So did you enlist or commission?
I commissioned.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So um that leads me to my next question. You didn't have an original AFSC because you weren't necessarily like when I say AFSC, I always think like your enlisted code because I never understand really what all the officer AFSC codes mean. Like I have to kind
Mhm.
of get into it with my current officer because he's a 32 Echo Foxtrot Hotel or something like that. I was like, I don't know what any of those identifiers mean, man. Like you gotta
Yeah.
break this down. Like when we go and I search for training, I have to search and specifically search for his AFSC for training so I can make sure that he's all spun up on all the stuff that he needs to be spun up on.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the officer AFSC. So what was your original job in the Air Force?
So my original job to me, like the officer codes were simple because it's only 4 digits, right?
Hmm.
Or four characters, but it was a 33S3, which at the time was a communications officer. So I
Okay.
did computer science in school, and I really wanted to get into the Office of Special Investigations since my freshman year of college because I talked to this one crusty retired shooting team guy that it was security forces, and he knew about OSI. He's like, oh, you should try this. It's really cool. It's interesting. But selection for OSI out of college or any of the commissioning sources is exceptionally rare. It's hard to
Right.
do. So I think the calculus at the time for the Air Force was like, oh, you did computer science, so you'll be good for communications, and that's what they put me in. So
Right.
now, as I was getting out the last few years, like that job or the name of the job changed, I think, to cyber to make it more sexy or cool. But
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Everything's
yeah,
cyber these days.
yeah. But I was a comm guy for my first 6 years. Yeah.
Okay, first 6 years were a comm officer. Where were those 6 years at?
So my first assignment was at Peterson Air Force Base, which is now
Okay.
Space Force Base, I guess,
Yeah.
and in Colorado Springs, and
Yep.
and that was great too because that put me at the Olympic Training Center, so I could train,
Okay.
continue
Yep.
shooting there. So I guess we kind of skipped the part. I shot in high school. That's
Okay.
where I initially started doing competitive shooting because my
Okay.
high school had a team through Army JROTC, and then I shot in college as part of the TCU Rifle Club, because
Okay.
TCU still is pretty well known as having a women's only rifle team.
Okay.
Because of
I didn't know
Title
that.
IX and all that. And so that I could keep shooting, I found a loophole that if I created a club, I mean, the coach for the women's team at the time had no problem me shooting there. He's just like, you got to have a reason to shoot here. And so I was
Right.
like, well, I'll make the club. And so I, ran the club and found that it was actually hard. I was running recruiting, like trying to get people interested in it, but there definitely was a point where I realized, well, I'm spending this time training these people, brand new how to shoot. I really need to focus on my shooting. So I was kind of
Right.
trying to find a balance of that, but it worked out. For the 4 years I was able to train. But from that, and what we see or what we saw on the Air Force shooting team a lot of times is that after you get away from a club sport, either at high school level, 4-H, college, or whatever, if you go to a location that doesn't have an active club for that style of international shooting, it's hard to keep at it.
Yeah.
So I was very fortunate to be, in Colorado Springs, and I could go to the Olympic Training Center. They have a club there. Or at least it did at the time, that you could go and train on weeknights. And you could even go during the day and just shoot, and everyone was cool about it. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome. So spent your first 6 years at Peterson as a comm officer, and then you said that you.
No, actually, so the first one was at Peterson, and then after like 2 or 3 years, I got sent to Belgium, and that
Oh,
was
okay. That sounds
throw the
terrible.
doors off. That was amazing.
Yeah, it sounds like a
Yeah,
terrible assignment. Belgium. Do we even have a
yeah.
base in Belgium, or is it like a tiny little outpost, or is it like a liaison position?
It was a tiny little outpost. Most people, when you tell them Belgium, if they've ever had like a PCS to Europe or whatever, they're like, oh, you were at Shape, and I'm like, oh, slow down. Shape's the supreme headquarters, Allied Powers Europe. I love these like legacy
Yeah.
80s or 60s kind of James Bondish names to organizations.
Supreme
Um,
power.
yeah. And even the leader is the Secours, the Supreme Allied Commander Europe. I'm like, yeah, that's a great name. They also have Cosmic Top Secret as one of their in NATO. This is their classifications. It's not top secret; it's Cosmic Top Secret. I'm like, that's just space age, 1960s, awesome. But
Yeah.
no, I was so Shape headquarters is in Mons, and also
Okay.
and NATO headquarters is in Brussels, and that's like the western part. I
Right.
was in the eastern part of the country at a place no one's ever heard of called the NATO Programming Center,
Yep. Never
and
heard of it.
it was in Glans, Belgium. And when I was in with Peterson, my boss at the time was telling me, he's like, "Oh, you're young, you're single. For your next assignment, you really should think about going overseas." And to me, that was like, "What? Overseas? Can
Yeah.
you drink the water? What?" And so I finally, like on my little dream sheet, wrote the bases I knew of, like England,
Yeah.
Germany, and I think I put France on there. And so it's kind of funny they stuck me in Belgium, which is right in the center of all those. So
Nice. Yeah.
yeah.
So I have a friend. She is a CSS specialist, and she just got like the London field office because she's like a postmaster by trade. So
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
now she's working like the post office in London for like all the APO mail. And
Oh, nice.
dude, that's a pretty sweet gig. She's like, yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. Um,
Yeah.
so then you went
What
to
an
Belgium. How
opportunity.
did you get linked up with OSI? Were so is it considered a cross train like it is for the enlisted
Yeah.
folks? Like, or is it like a something officer fancy, like a requisition of responsibility change or something like that?
No, it's cross training. It's funny the way I got into it. I'd been trying since my first year. So at the time, the rules were you could apply once a year, um, and you had up to 6 years, I think, of service before you could, or before you expire
Right.
your eligibility to cross train. And so every year I try, and every year I'd hear that the communications career field was too low manned, so
Yep.
basically your career field manager has to let you go to, even if they
Yeah.
OSI selected you, they still have to let you go. And every time I'd hear no. And so for my, very last package, I'd heard no so many times. I just kind of threw it in the mail and just like
Yeah.
went on with my life. And it's funny, every package up to that point, I tried to make sure that it was paperclip just right. And, everything was perfect and everything was signed just right. That last package was a shit show, and that was the one they liked. So
Yes.
uh,
It was the raw authentic package.
yeah, this guy doesn't even need us. Let's get him. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
There's the guy that super wants to be there, and then the guys that just like literally just mailing it in.
Yeah, yeah. So imagine my surprise when I got a call before Christmas, and it was like 2005, and they're like, "Yeah, you got picked up."
Okay, so you have been looking or actively trying to cross over into OSI. You got picked up, or you sent your package in, you got picked up, and then you get notified of cross training, and then it's off to like FLETC, or is it off to like, are you OJTing with your local OSI detachment? Is like what's that like?
Yeah, so it took a year between the investigation because you have I already had a top secret clearance and a
Right.
cosmic top secret clearance at the time, but
Ooh, see, that's something you can hold on people. Be like, I have a cosmic top secret
yeah,
clearance.
it's interstellar, baby. But yeah, so you have to wait. OSI does their own investigation too, and by the time that was finished, then you have to wait for class date. So I did go. I was lucky enough to get a follow-on assignment to Spangdahlem in
Okay.
Germany, which sounds really far away, but it was only an hour and a half away from where I was living, which was great
Right.
because I started dating my wife at the time, and I was like, well, I'm not ready to get married yet, but I don't want to give this relationship up, so I'm just gonna move
Right.
an hour and a half down the road. And I wanted to stay in Europe. I was having such a wonderful time, and um, but I did go to the detachment at Spangdahlem a couple times before I went to FLETC, just to kind of see, what
Yeah.
that world was like. And then, January of 2007, I went to FLETC, and that was a great experience.
And for the listeners that don't understand, so like um the OSI is the Office of Special Investigations. So it's very similar to your Army CID or your Navy NCIS. It's the Air Force's version of that. It's, to my knowledge, federally accredited um, law enforcement. So it's more advanced than your normal like security forces or military police. They have like jurisdiction on military grounds and property, but you as an OSI agent or federally recognized as a federal law enforcement officer.
Well, we were. That's controversial now.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I always tell people it's like OSI is like NCIS, but we don't have a TV show and we don't solve any crimes in an hour. But in the last 2 years before I got out, I and I've heard different reasons for this. I heard like they couldn't get enough slots, and then I've heard it was to be more respectful of Army CID. But most agents now coming out of or coming into OSI are not federally accredited anymore. They called it an 1811 certification.
Okay.
And yeah, I definitely have thoughts on like I think that's a bad move for the organization, and I love that I can speak freely about that now.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, it doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, prior to maybe it was like 2003, 2004, the Air Force used to have their own OSI school, and that's where they would train agents or whatever. And
Okay.
then they got on board after 9/11 with FLETC, like, hey, we're going to send our folks to FLETC and become accredited, just like a DEA agent or ATF agent or
Right.
Homeland Security or whatever. And that was great. Like you're that way you're saying you meet a federal standard of training, right?
Right.
Army CID has never done that. Army CID agents are not federally accredited, never have been, to my knowledge.
Okay.
Maybe like once in the 50s or something. I don't know. But for the longest time, throughout my entire career, Army CID agents went to Leavenworth, a school in Leavenworth.
Okay.
And, like the Air Force had their own school before, the Army has perpetually had their own school where they say they train their folks. So I've heard that was one of the reasons, that drove this, that say, hey, let's be respectful of the Army and have all the services not go through 1811 training. I don't know about civilian agents anymore. I don't know how that works because OSI and NCIS as well have civilian agents. Army CID does as well. But yeah, as I was leaving, I was hearing rumblings about this, that they were sending classes through that weren't getting 1811 certification. And that just blew my mind.
Wow, that's
Um,
crazy.
yeah. And yeah, I don't know how that's going to work out long term. I think it's a very bad move.
I
Yeah.
mean, so of all the career fields that I've interacted with and run into in my 20 years or whatever, OSI has always been like the most like not outwardly secretive, but like the agents that I've come in contact with, they don't talk a lot. They don't talk about the job a lot. They're very mysterious and like, gotta, cover everything up with a cape, like very close guarded, everything like that.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know too much about OSI besides what I've talked to
Yeah.
from my friends that are OSI. And even then, I don't really, I knew them before they were agents. So I don't really talk to them about, you know, what they do and whatnot. So like, to my
Yeah.
knowledge, like not only are you doing investigations that involve like the base, but also maybe service members off base. Like if you're in a town and there's a bunch of people are getting popped for drugs and you interrogate or investigate and they're getting it from a main supplier, you may jump on a task force with a local PD to nab the dealer or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just throwing that out
So,
there, random. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's what I assume OSI agents do.
yeah. So OSI, their primary charge, at least for like criminal investigation. So there's several parts to it, right? There's counterintelligence, there's protective service operations. Um, you know, there's a cyber front or cyber aspect as well, and the criminal and fraud. But primarily, like the criminal part of it, you would say is we're in charge of, or the organization's in charge of felony level missions. So any crime that would land you a year or more in jail, like your murders, rapes, homicides, child pornography, drugs, drug dealing, not necessarily drug use, but drug dealing, things like that.
Right.
They would do. And then to your point about security forces has their own investigators as well, and they're more in charge of misdemeanor type crimes, like say something small scale. Say like some bicycles are getting stolen in base housing,
Right.
like shoplifting at the BX, things like that. They would investigate those sorts of things where that would meet the threshold of a felony level sentence equivalent
Right.
on the Air Force side. So we wouldn't necessarily look at that.
Like when I was at Edwards, the school had like shut down for like some repairs or something like that. Some base housing kids broke in and caused like $60,000 worth of damage. Like
Yeah.
that's felony damage. So like it went to the OSI detachment on
Yeah.
base. Like it there's a threshold to what you got. I don't want to say we'll get involved with because I'm not saying like things are below you, but like
Yeah.
people have their areas of responsibility.
It depends kind of who's in leadership at the time, but occasionally there are thresholds of like fraud dollars that have to be exceeded
Yeah.
before we would investigate. And then some administrations are like, whatever, you're just going to investigate all fraud, But so it
Yeah.
kind of goes,
So
and probably is tied to Manning as well.
yeah, so you spent 6 years in comm and then the rest of your time in security or in OSI.
Yes.
Okay. So what was the most fulfilling event while serving in the OSI role?
The
Like of
most
all the
fulfilling
things that you've
event.
worked or cases or things that you were a part of, what do you feel that was probably the most impactful to you?
Oh, but the most fun was we did internet crimes against children operations.
Okay.
And I guess I'll go back to what you said a second ago about OSI being so secretive. I think they're unnecessarily secretive. I mean, even the CIA has a more active like social media profile about
Right.
things that they're doing, and something that there actually is an opening soon for, or recently there was an opening for the public affairs position for OSI, the civilian side. So I think the person that was doing that job for the longest time is now retired or moved on. And I'm kind of curious to see, as an outsider looking in now, if they're going to be more forthcoming on some of the things they do. Because I hate how they rely on DOJ when there's like a big fraud case like that, or some kind of big like high profile case, work with the agencies and the Department of Justice is involved. OSI will just post the DOJ summary of the case and not provide any information. I wish OSI would be like more forthcoming, be like, hey, this is what we did. This is how, this is the case that we worked. I don't think there is a need to be so secretive, and at least for the criminal side, and
Right.
definitely for the counterintelligence side. If there's any successes, even from like a few years back, that you can talk about them.
Right.
just to get it out there. Because again, like even the CIA is more forthcoming right now than OSI is, and I guess maybe there's probably a thought in the organization like, well, if we remain mysterious, then we'll just be the elusive agency out there. But
Right.
it's strange too that there's been a renaming of the organization. It's no longer the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, although I think still technically on paper it is. But previous commander renamed it Office of Special Investigations, and that's opened kind of like an odd situation, because on their social media, which they do have social media, but again, this is not where I think it should be. But because they're now kind of nebulously named Office of Special Investigation, not necessarily tied to the Air Force,
right, specifically
naming
Air Force.
Yeah. So like when they post stuff or they post stuff on their pages, you get people asking about when are you guys looking into Epstein, Epstein's murder and stuff like that, because the general public looks at that
doesn't
and thinks,
understand that it's
yeah,
tied to the Air Force.
Yeah, you guys must be the Federal Office of Special Investigations. You're going to look into everything. It's like, no. So and that was done primarily to be more inclusive of the Space Force. But I personally don't understand that rationale, because Navy Criminal Investigative Service didn't rename themselves. Yeah, they cover the Marine Corps. So
we learned that from Gibbs.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. The decision's way above my pay grade, and it's I don't get it, but I don't have to.
Yeah, you don't have to anymore. You're not paid to get it anymore.
Yeah. So I can just be like, hey, this is what I observed. So
okay. So deployments wise, everybody likes to hear about deployments. Now I assume that OSI deployments are a little bit different. I have very briefly interacted with OSI on a deployment in Iraq in 2007. I was there doing FP duty, so like the escorts, TCN escort duty, and like we would come and clean your guys' compound in Kirkuk. And that's about the only interaction that I had with you guys, is like knocking on the door, you guys letting us in, you guys locking the talk, and then like we'd clean the compound, and that was about it. But Iraq 2007, I know that you guys were doing a lot of different stuff. So like from your experience, like how many deployments, like if you can talk about a time frame or a location like Iraq or Afghanistan or whatever, and then maybe a significant event that took place during a deployment.
Okay. I just realized I kind of went on a diatribe and didn't answer your previous question. So I'll pin that one and come back to it. But one of my favorite times in OSI was when we worked internet crimes against children cases. Trying to catch, catch a predator type stuff.
Yeah. Chris Hansen.
And that was Chris Hansen type stuff. Yeah. And that was so rewarding. That was so fulfilling. And very exciting. It was really great to do that. And the sad reality of it is that there's so much of that going on. There's so many creepers. I mean, we were, primarily charged with like looking for things affecting an Air Force base, but just casting a wide net out there if you do, which we can't, because there's very specific rules on that. But I mean, like just seeing what's out, out there in the broad scheme of things of adults trying to meet children, it's terrifying. So keep your kids close.
Yeah, and then like I'm not like believe everything on the internet, but there's a clip going around and it's kind of going, mini viral right now about there's civilians going out there and engaging with these individuals and semi catching them in the act or catching them at the meetup location. These civilians calling the police, and then their desk sergeant saying like, well, don't even bring them in because they're just going to get released because they're not going to get booked, or they're not they're just going to get turned away because the prosecutor's not going to do anything with it, which is crazy to me. But
yeah, well, and I'm double on that, and I've talked to some of my former colleagues and things, their thoughts as well. But on the one hand, I think it's great because I enjoy like those videos of like catching them naming and shaming these folks. But yeah, like the chain of custody and the evidence and all 100%. That. if you have like a shit hot prosecutor that will take that on and understands like this is a criminal and we'll work this because we should, then I think that a good prosecutor can make it work. If you've got a more risk adverse prosecutor, which a lot of them are, unfortunately, I think you're going to have problems trying to get actual criminal action. So they could get arrested, but then there's not going to be charges. The only upshoot, and if you can call it this, is that chances are the people that engage in that type of activity, this isn't their first time. A lot of them say, "Oh, I've never done this before." Yeah, right. You've tried it, or this is maybe the first one you've actioned, but you've definitely been hoping and trying and planning and scheming. So the only thing is like you hope that they'll get caught by law enforcement in the future if they weren't, if there were no charges brought for whatever civilians do. So the other part of it, like especially now that I'm out, that I really enjoy is that they can say things to those creeps that we never could.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And just shame them. And I'm like, oh, that's so. So there's like for me, there's a gratifying piece watching that. To say the things that as humans you think, but as a professional, you're not allowed to, you're not allowed to shame the person.
As a charged law enforcement officer, as a Air Force member, there's certain things we can't do.
Right. So yeah, there's definitely like some therapy in that.
Yeah.
Watching that, but I mean, like the end goal then is all you really come away with is a video, and then hopefully people that know that person or future employers or whatever will come across that video.
Yeah.
Because once it's on the internet, it's always there, right? So
exactly. Give me 1 second. I'm going to go check on the boys real quick. Perfect. Fastest diaper change ever.
Wow.
Okay. So we ended with that one. So we'll go back to the deployments.
Okay. You said you were asking about deployment stories or something.
Yeah. Like how many, like, is you guys deploy, like, is it for the full 6 months? Is it shorter deployments? Like say, Rangers where they do like the 2 to 4 months versus 6 months. Are you guys there in place longer, like a year or something like that? Or any significant stories or a funny story?
It really depends on your job and where you're at and what you're doing, and then like what's going on at the time, right? So a lot of normal deployments, like 6-month deployments, and then there are shorter ones. I've seen people do like 2 or 3 months, but I would say that's more on the exceptional side.
Okay.
And then I did a remote, so I was in Qatar for a year, and but I lived there, but I traveled all around.
Okay, so like it was more like a regional deployment.
Well, yeah, that was kind of exceptional too, the way it was. But the job that I had at the time had me moving around most of the Middle East, and then Afghanistan, and then Manas, Kyrgyzstan as well.
Yep.
So, yep.
Okay. So do you have like a total number? Like you said that you ended up deploying, but it was like to a European theater, not necessarily like what people think of as a deployment like Iraq, Afghanistan, like.
Yeah. So yeah, that counted as a deployment. It was kind of weird again.
Yeah.
Like I was just down the road. I could still go home like in the weekends. But and that's not, it sounds weird, but I remember my first duty assignment, we had a guy at Peterson that deployed to Eglin in Florida for 6 months.
Yep.
And it blew my mind at the time. Like, how did you deploy?
How is that a deployment? Yeah.
Yeah.
We had our senior deploy from Edwards to, I think, Tampa, because he was at like SOCOM headquarters for a little bit. I was like, how is that a deployment?
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't make any sense. It counts for his deployment time, but yeah, it was very, very awkward to us that didn't really understand what was going on.
Yeah, for sure. But so yeah, there was that, and then I did my year, and then when I got to my last assignment, I was on a list for this basically this rotating position in Afghanistan that would come up every 6 months, and then before we got out of there was starting to be word that they were going to turn off that job, so I wouldn't have to go. And then within my last 18 months before I retired, there was a deployment, or I was the hottest of the folks in my office to deploy, but by that point they knew I was going to hit the retirement button. So
Right.
sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So is there a significant event or mission that you ran while in a deployed status that kind of like your most fulfilling aspect of your OSI career? Is there a most fulfilling aspect of your deployed time?
Oh, well, a lot of things. I mean, trying to think if I can talk about what I can talk about.
Yeah, obviously there's still some requirements that you got to hold as far as what you can and can't talk
Yeah.
about.
Um, well, one of the guys that worked for me, he helped. I guess I'll put it in general terms. He helped stop somebody that was allegedly trying to poison food at a chow
Okay.
hall.
Okay.
So that was interesting. But I mean, like I wasn't directly interviewing the guy on that one.
Right.
That just kind of stands out in my mind. Like, oh yeah, that was a pretty interesting one that we did. And then actually, I worked on some criminal cases too, which is weird because normally we don't do a lot of criminal stuff when we're in a deployed environment. Yeah. But I interviewed. So weird. I interviewed. Or got called. We were in town and got called back because there was a alleged sexual assault that had occurred, and I interviewed the subject with one of my coworkers, and then I PCS to the same base where that guy was after
Oh
the
man.
deployment. So by that point, it actually went to trial.
Yeah, follow-up interviews were easy.
So yeah. Well, didn't have to do that. Yeah, after like the interviews, you have to wait through like the legal process to work, its way. And I didn't have to run the case. I just did the subject interview. But yeah, that was interesting to be like, oh yeah, no, I've got to testify today at this base that
this guy just so happens to be at.
Yeah, so that was interesting. That was a good case. And then this will sound weird, but you think of like, to me, like I don't think about the work so much. I always think about like the good times that you have, and I try to bring that up to people too in the military that everyone's expected to do their job, right?
Right.
But it's when you do something different that's what people remember. People don't remember like you did that awesome PowerPoint presentation. Oh,
Yeah.
it's so great. No, they remember like you threw a party and like
Yep.
like oh yeah, that was so much fun. So when I was deployed, I got there in July, and Halloween was coming up in October. I'm a really big Halloween guy, so I was like, I want to do a haunted house. And so we organized a haunted. We turned our office into a haunted house.
Nice.
Lock up the skiff or lock up the secret stuff, right?
Yeah.
But we turned our building into a haunted house, and everyone in like my office and like the broader OSI office in the base, chipped in and collaborated, and I think some people found their calling that night. Like my polygraph guy at the time, we had one guy working a chainsaw. We borrowed a chainsaw from the fire department, and took the chain off, of course. And that was going to be our big
nice
gotcha. Yeah. That was going to be our big gotcha when people were leaving the house. You're done, and they were have some chase you into the desert with a chainsaw. And the first guy we had do it, we had volunteers obviously helping us out from the broader base as well. And the first guy was doing it, he just didn't really have the gusto. Like he did it, but and then when Joe took over, like Joe was like scaring the shit out of people. He was just running at full speed, and I was like, Joe, this is it, man. This is what you need to do in life. Yeah.
You have job security for 1 month a year now.
Yeah. I mean, he just went full bore, and but yeah, to me, like that was such a fun occasion to do that, and jump forward about another year, 2 year, another year, or a year and a half or so. I was in LA for the stage reading of a play called the stage reading of a script called The Hateful Eight, which got turned into a movie, The Hateful Eight. So the story goes, like Tarantino at the time had been writing that script. It got leaked by, I think it was Gawker or something like that, and he said, "Screw it, I'm not going to do this movie." And then a nonprofit film organization in LA wanted to have some kind of charity event, and they convinced him to do a stage reading of the script. The stage reading is basically like the actors have, they're given a script, they do just one rehearsal, just reading through it, and then they do it on stage live, and they basically are just reading the script, right? They're not memorizing their lines, but they're acting to a degree, but they're reading
Right.
it, from a page. And so yeah, he had most of the actors that ended up in the Hateful Eight, to include Kurt Russell and Samuel L. Jackson, and all that, come out on stage, and they read their parts. And while I was there, my best friend was there at the time, and he was seated away from me. He was seated next to a guy, and they were talking. The guy was like a director, and my buddy was telling him about when I was deployed, how I had this haunted house, because the director said he was working on a documentary about haunted houses, and my buddy's, my buddy made this haunted house in a war zone. It was awesome. And so jump forward another year, and I do an interview for that, and then 2 years later it gets released. It's called Haunters: The Art of the Scare. And again, just being a big movie buff, it was great to actually have my name like in the credits now and something, I can point to that and say, yeah, I'm in a movie. So it's a documentary, awesome. But it was great. It was really fun to do. And then I went to the premiere of it in LA back in 2017 at the Egyptian, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. But it's just funny how kind of things work out like that.
That's awesome. Give me one more second. They're getting rowdy.
Sure.
Heathens, I tell you, heathens.
Yeah.
Okay, so all right, so you were on the Air Force shooting team. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
So the Air Force has a shooting team. It covers a bunch of different disciplines. What are some of those disciplines?
So I did international rifle,
okay,
which is honestly, we could talk about this in a broader context, but I mean, it's going the way of the dodo, and there's a lot of reasons for that.
Right.
But then there's service rifle, there's action, the action team, there's shotgun, service pistol. Actually, I think pistol now is all incorporated into one, but it's kind of bifurcated to like service pistol, international, and stuff like that. And yeah, they're all spread out. The teams are not centrally located anywhere. There's no big, get together every year where everyone high fives each other. Because I've met plenty of people over my career that said, "Oh yeah, do you know so and so? They're on the team." And I'm like,
I literally did that to you 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So, right before I got out, I got plugged in with the action team because I think we shared an ammo account together. And I went out to North Carolina and trained with them for a few days, and that was a lot of fun. But that was the first time I'd really, spent any considerable amount of time with anyone outside of the International Rifle Team. So the budgets are minuscule. We used to have our own. For the longest time, we were the only sport in the Air Force with our own AFI, and then they consolidated. Someone finally realized what was going on. They consolidated it into like a broader sports package. Yeah. But the budgets are minuscule for each of the teams. I think they're $7,500 or $10,000 a year for the team. So really, all you can do is pay for some incidental stuff, and then maybe you get together for a big match or something. And cover the travel and lodging for that.
And money doesn't go very far with travel these days.
No, it doesn't. And we get ammo, but that's debatable too. Depends how you do it. There is a COTS process, and a couple times in my career it worked out just right where I could actually get ammo that's matched to my barrel. Yeah. And then other times it would just be like off the shelf. Here you go. Maybe it shoots well, maybe it doesn't. Yeah. It's a very complicated process to do. But it is nice. It's free ammo. It's still ammo, right? So, but when I started, I realized that at least for the international side at the time, and when I started, it was cool. It was like still full TDYs and all that. Then after 9/11, suddenly it turned off. Now it's like all permissive TDYs. Yep. Which the difference being like a TDY, if you're TDY, your official orders, you get a per diem. Yep. Your mission is basically wherever you are to do that. Permissive TDY is like your boss says, I will allow you to go without taking leave.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Everything else is on you. All the expenses are on you.
Much appreciated.
Yeah.
So I don't have to use my actual leave days.
Yeah. To represent the Air Force. Yeah. It is strange. Like the Army. So the Army has a full-time team. The Army Marksmanship Unit.
Yep.
They're based at Fort Benning. Very
Bunch
well
of my friends
renowned.
are out there. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Olympic side historically they've done very well. They normally have like one or two people in the Olympics every Olympics. Doing shooting. But for them, it's like they pick guys and girls up from college that shot in college, and basically offer them, hey, you're probably not going to be any higher than I think it's like a sergeant first class or something like that for your whole career. But if you want to have the best gear, the best equipment, the best training available, and just shoot for your next 20 years, yeah, you got to mow the lawn every once in a while, but which I seldom do. I saw. I'm sorry, I'm getting way off here, but I saw Mike Ante. He was a silver gold medalist at the 2004 2008 Olympics. A week later, I was at Fort Benning, and he was driving around on their mower, mowing their lawn. And I just thought it's so funny. I'm like, there's this guy, he just won a silver medal in the Olympics, and he's having to, mow the freaking lawn. But that's the Army. But they have that program, and they do that full time. The Air Force is definitely not set up that way.
Right. That was going to be one of my questions. So like, you're still doing your full-time job, like,
yeah.
And this is kind of like you're doing this your own dime, your own time kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Indeed. And that's one of the things, like, that, people say, oh, how do I get on the team? And I can't speak for all the different teams, but broadly how it works out is.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions is like, so to sidebar here for a second, like I met some of the action shooting guys, Nick Caesar, I think he was the captain of the action shooting team there for a while. I met him in like 2008 or 2009 while he was stationed down here at Eglin or Herbert Field or something like that. And like, was like, hey, well, how do you get on the team? And he was like, oh, you got to be like a class B shooter in the USPSA and this, that, the other thing. So like, at least I knew how or the direction to go, but like, there's no real, like, I don't know of a way to be like, hey, I shoot, I want to try out for the Air Force team. Like I don't understand how dudes get or individuals get on the Air Force team in the first place.
Yeah. Well, the first problem is you got to find somebody, right? So it's that's a hard part too. But if you're doing matches, hopefully you'll run into somebody, or if you're like, looking nationally, like what's going on, you'll see somebody and maybe recognize that they're in the Air Force. That's a bit of a harder thing to show. I mean, it's like the service team, the national, I think they call it the National Rifle Team or something like that for the Air Force shooting team. They have a Facebook page, so at the minimum you can at least reach out to them. But yeah, so generally they want you shooting matches. I think this is pretty much across the board. Shooting matches on your own dime. Because that shows you have the interest. You're not just waiting for, hey, I want to get picked up and I'll do lots of shooting on the Air Force dime. It doesn't work that way. And again, the money's just not there to facilitate that. So shooting, local, regional, national matches on your own dime is important. And that was really the key. And then what kind of separates international rifle from, I would say, most of the other disciplines is the cost for entry is a lot greater. I mean, to be like minimally competitive on the international side, you're dropping at least $5,000 or $6,000 from the start. Which I'm sure someone on the other teams like, well, my rifle or my shotgun costs $6,000. Well, I'm sure it does. But I'm saying, like, to be minimally competitive. I'm not saying like that this is all you need. And what, just to peel back when I said that it's kind of like dying off like a dinosaur or whatever, or going the way of the dodo. The international side, what I saw consistently throughout my entire career was that these folks that come from, again, the club sports, 4-H, JROTC, college system, they get in the Air Force and they want to shoot again, and they're probably good. Like, I know I could see some of the names and stuff like that. Like, I know they're good. But the first question is like, hey, I want to get on the Air Force shooting team. You hook me up with some gear, because they've been used to everything being provided, which I totally get. I was too. But suddenly when you're away from that that system that provides everything for you, and you've got to buy your own jacket, got to buy your own prone mat. You got to get your stand. You've got to get your rifle. You've got to get all the little accoutrements that go along with it. It doesn't get interesting. Like people go, save money for a car, buy all that crap. I don't know. It's like they just don't want to do it. And I get it. And so like almost the same way in home theater, I could see the writing on the wall as I was like in the college system. I was like, I need to get my own air rifle. Like I need to start, incrementally buying some stuff. Because if I want to keep doing this, it's not always going to be here.
Exactly.
But yeah, time and time again, I'd have people reach out that, were like wanting to shoot, and I would love to have them shoot. But we can't buy them gear. I mean, my first few years when I was talking about like things were TDY or PTDY or whatever, I mean, everything was PTDY after the first year, but we did initially buy some jackets for some people. It wasn't my call, but I mean, the leadership of the team at the time bought some jackets from people, and it became very apparent we should never do that again, because they'd come maybe to a match or two, and then they'd PCS, and you'd never hear from them again, and you would never see that jacket. Who knows where that jacket ended up?
Exactly.
But eBay probably. But so yeah, some accountability things there. So we learned that after certain points, like we're not buying major pieces of gear for people. I remember we had one shooter that he went to several of the matches. He'd shot in college. He shot really well. Great guy. Just loved him. But his stuff was stolen at an airport one time, or his bag was stolen at an airport. And that was it for him. He was like, we never heard from him again, but I can only imagine that he was probably thinking, well, I don't really want to spend all that money to buy all that crap.
Exactly. Right.
So what that happens, or what that causes is a attrition of folks. And at peak numbers, I think we had like 7 people towards the later half of my career. And just, people started retiring, separating, and just that number's dwindled down to like 2 folks now. In fact, I think probably only one is really actively competing. So for the international side.
And I mean, and I don't want to say that it's not fun, it's not hard, it's not anything like that, but it's not sexy, right? Like you're standing, kneeling, prone shooting, like going to a match and watching it probably isn't super entertaining. Like it's long, hot hours in the sun, like waiting and then some shooting and then waiting around for a next volley, things like that. Even in other disciplines like shotgun, those 25 birds, probably really exciting. Probably not super great to watch. Like, and I mean, in my sport, the PRS, they've done some things to make it a little bit more entertaining. Like John Scouten from Shooting USA has come out and covered the Armageddon Gear Cup every year, and they've done their post-production to make it exciting. But like watching somebody shoot a plate, like from the third person view of somebody shooting, and then a trigger cam or like a phone scope on a spotter watching the target downrange either get hit or missed, like not super entertaining in comparison. Baseball, football, NASCAR, UFC, like, you know what I mean? So like getting people like, oh dude, that looked really cool, I want to go do that. It's not necessarily there. Now 2-gun, 3-gun, action sports, USPSA, speed steel, that stuff's probably a little bit more entertaining, but even then, like, hold on.
Sure.
Sorry, the child bit the other child.
No problem.
Okay, sorry, where were we?
But you were talking about like the sexiness of the other disciplines that are out there, and you really hit on the head. The other reason that it's hard to get people to do international rifle anymore, outside of the collegiate and high school systems, and that's just because there is such a proliferation of gun disciplines, shooting sports in America. People gravitate towards those things because they are sexier. Like even my wife noticed years ago that when she came to like a small bore match, she'd fall asleep in the chair. And then I started doing Steel Challenge and stuff like that in USPSA. And she's like, oh, that's cool. I can actually see you hitting targets. I see things react. And That's more
Exactly.
interesting. And I can totally appreciate that, because when I watch someone shooting air rifle or small bore, it's like watching paint dry. I
Yep.
mean, if they're doing it right, like when I'm coaching, obviously I'm watching like to make sure they're doing it right. But if everything's firing on all cylinders like it should be, it's a very individual sport.
Yeah.
It's something that they're getting, and that extends to like the Air Force Wounded Warrior program for coaching international shooting and that venue. For folks that are wounded, ill, or injured that are trying to find recovery, this type of shooting, they shoot air rifle and they shoot air pistol. It's very therapeutic for them, and for
Yeah.
folks that have like nerves issues or focus issues or whatever, they find that this particular sport gives them sometimes their only solace of the day. And that sounds very strange to people sometimes, but we use electronic target systems, so they're shooting actual pellets into a target and gets fed back,
Through the
live
system.
to
Yep.
a monitor, so they can see how they did. They get that instant feedback, and that's very gratifying. I mean, we are an instant feedback society, and yeah, for folks to be able to get a commentary on their own performance right away, they find very enjoyable. So like we have team sports as well. I don't coach
Yeah.
those, but
Basketball.
team sports.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I always say like for the team sports, like, do you know how well you did in the game you just played? Like, do you know how much you contributed? And
Yeah.
maybe you do, maybe you don't. Sometimes there's like that star player that knows that they really kick butt, but generally you don't. But when it's just you and the rifle or the pistol, doing that very precise type of shooting, as soon as you shoot one good shot, I always say, well, do it 40 more times, and that kind of like blows their mind. Like, well, yeah, well, why can't I? And then they find out like how difficult it is, but it becomes a positive addiction, and it's just it's very neat to see that open. But just going back, I mean, yeah, from that, there's always the gateway into other sports that are out there. And, in particular, I love gun runs. I found out about gun runs about 3-4 years ago. And
What's a gun run?
So a gun run is like a Tough Mudder with shooting.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah. I think I've heard of these.
yeah. So there is I think it's the gunrun.us that does a lot of them in North Carolina, Alabama, South Carolina.
Okay.
That was my first kind of foray into them, and the experiences that they put on is top notch. Ellis, I think is the guy's name that runs those. But I've also been to some in Georgia, and soon I'll be going to some in Oklahoma. But those matches are fantastic because I like to work out, right? Like in the military or military background or whatever, you want to keep in shape. And that's one thing as a veteran I want to do. I don't want to be like, I don't have to do a PT test anymore. I just let myself go.
Yeah.
So, try to keep as active as I can, especially with like injuries and stuff that I've sustained over time. I think it's important to keep flexible and whatever. So, being able to do those gun runs, I think are an important part, just to keep alive, like keep things flowing. But then there's the shooting component to it as well that I really enjoy. And contrary to popular belief, you don't have to run those races. You can walk them.
Yeah.
Old timers call it fancy golf. But yeah, they're great because one thing I don't like about I love Steel Challenge, and that's kind of its own thing or whatever. But like USPSA matches, what I don't like, and I guess I can't remember. I think PRS does this a bit too. But before a match, you're allowed to see the stage, right? Is that the same in PRS? Yep. And so USPSA, there's all these guys walking around like trying to game it, like if I run this way, doing all that, and do it this way and whatever. And I'm tired of like things like that. I don't want to. I already come from a sport that's very like what you're walking into and you know how it goes and all that. I love the unexpected element of it. And for gun runs, they don't tell you anything about they might give you some very broad information about what you'll encounter, because you leave from a starting point like a 5K race, and then it's just you and your gear during that entire time. There's no, I mean, I guess you could go back and get something if you got out of the car, but that's just going to kill your time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you run out there, but they might give you like a hint, like take this shotgun shell. You'll need this on the 5th stage or whatever. Even if you don't have a shotgun, they'll provide one to you. But they'll give you very, very broad information. But for the most part, you're going in blind. And I love getting into that situation of like, well, what I do? Like, how do I react to this situation? I mean,
Right.
if you had time to game it, yeah, there's probably a very easy way to execute some of the things, or maybe you can find
Yeah.
some efficiencies, but you're just kind of thrown into a stage. And I love that. I love being tired already
So
because,
the adventure shooting almost, right?
yeah, kind of
So
adventure shooting.
so whether it be the gun run or like sniper adventure challenge or the um the competition dynamics or like the team sniper matches or NRL Hunter. Like it's a blind stage. You get 4 minutes to find, range, and engage your targets, and
Yeah.
everything has to start from a ruck on your back. I'm actually going to one of those matches this weekend. I'm not volunteering to be a range officer for it.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
a guy that I shoot with quite often, former military guy, been on the show. He is hosting the match in Alabama, um, and these matches don't run without range support. So I do a lot of range support stuff, so range officer stuff. So I'm gonna go up there and shoot the whole match on Friday, all 17, 18 stages, whatever it is, and then Saturday and Sunday I'm gonna RO it for the rest of the competitors.
Oh, nice.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, and that format, it's literally like you start with your rifle in hand and all your gear, including your tripod, glass, everything on your back, and then they're like, okay, here's your start point, here's your ranging pin, and you'll go over, put your binos up, and you got to find, and there's these other two flags, and those are what like your limits, right, of where your targets are going
Yeah.
to be, and they're like, it's in the shape of a coyote. Like you'll get a target size and how many targets, and that's it. And
That's
then you
cool.
you have
Yeah.
to find them. Yeah. It's super fun. It's super interesting. It does it 100% pertain to hunting? I don't know. I don't hunt a lot, but it's a fun match, and I like going and talking to the shooters and everything like that. So that's a different discipline. I haven't done one of the tactical games. I haven't done a gun run or anything else like that, but it's on my bucket list of shooting events to get to for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, there's probably something you said too about this, I like how you call it adventure shooting, but just the danger element too. I mean, I remember my first gun run, at the end of the match when they're handing out awards and things like that, they pulled up two dead snakes they killed, during the day that were along the
Oh yeah,
trail. And they were
100%.
giant. And me and my buddy were looking at each other like, damn,
Yeah,
I'm glad we didn't run upon that, and so there's that element too that we between stages, it's just you running,
yeah,
or walking or moving or whatever, and um, you're on your own to some degree. I mean,
yep,
eventually someone will come by and you can get help, and they explain their procedures for safety and all that. If you come across someone that's hurt, how and help them and all that. But yeah, there's just that element that this is that you're on your own for a little bit, and anything could happen. And
yeah.
yeah.
That's super cool. I want to transition into your military transition, but before we do that, was there any other last minute things you want to hit on the Air Force shooting team?
No, no, it was a great ride, and
Awesome.
I'm available for recontact if you have additional questions about it. So I think you covered my bio well for a lot of the shooting team stuff at the start. So
Okay. Um, so on your transition, you said 21, 22 years in the military?
21. Mhm.
21? Okay. And we talked a little bit about why you decided to get into the military. Like your dad was in the military for 4 years during the Vietnam era, right? But what was the moment when you decided to get out of the military?
Well, hitting 20 was a big milestone, and I would have punched at 20, but I didn't think the economy was very good at the time. It was
Okay.
right after COVID, and I'm like, oh, how's that going to work out?
Yeah. I think a lot of people
And
stayed for
so
that.
yeah, yeah. So I was like, let me ride this out a bit longer just to see how
Things
this world's
go.
going to shake out. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah. Um, that also, like, my last job was at headquarters, and I
Ooh,
enjoyed
okay.
the first year I was at headquarters. Well, I didn't like the job for the first few months. The first job I had at headquarters, I was an associate director. But then I found my fun. My wife says I find my fun in my jobs, and I found fun in it. I was
Right.
getting, I was enjoying it, and like one, simple joy. And it sounds weird, but I realized that we had no onboarding process for new people in the building.
Oh,
Well, I guess there was something, but I was like,
I've been through that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So there was something, but it wasn't good. So we worked really hard to come up with a really good onboarding process. But then, like, it was fun when I realized they had a lot of civilians working in the building in different jobs, not necessarily agents, like support people or whatever,
Right.
that had been working in the building for a while and actually had no idea like what OSI does. I mean,
Oh,
they knew
wow.
their little part, but they didn't know the broader missions and all that. And
Right.
so I also opened it up that, hey, this onboarding is also if you've been here for a while and you're just kind of afraid by this point to ask any questions, because if you've been in a job long enough and you don't know something, you don't want to ask anybody.
Yeah,
So
you
like,
definitely
you don't
don't
know
want to
that?
ask anybody. Yeah.
Yeah. So that became really popular too, and that was awesome to, like, you see some people like they've been in the building for maybe 5 or 10 years, and they're like, oh yeah, I just came to check this out, and you're like, no, you probably came because no one ever told you, and I don't blame you, but there was
Yeah.
just no opportunity to kind of widen your scope of what was going on in the organization. But after that, like my last 2 years was working in a warfighter, and again, I tried to find my fun in that I could, but then COVID started, and there's like, it's just, I don't know. I got to work from home a lot. That was interesting, different. I mean, now that's kind of
Yeah.
more of a normal thing in the world, but um, yeah, I don't know. Like I didn't enjoy it anymore. Like I had
Right.
so many assignments where I was doing fun stuff, and I was like, yeah, it's time. It's
Yeah.
time to do something different. So, and it
So
was
like
important for me to. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so are you saying like when you know, you know?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, for
okay.
sure. Yeah,
Like I've heard
and
it, but like I don't know. Like because I'm at 20. Like my current contract is ends in like October of 25, but like I signed the indefinite one, so like however that ends up working or whatever. But like my plan is to retire in 26, and like I don't feel that I'm done, but I'm like I don't want to be that freaking E6 tech sergeant that freaking just rides it out to the max 10 year. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, where they tell you, hey, it's time for you to leave.
It's
Yeah,
time. Yeah.
yeah. Um, you know, the thing is too, a lot of people that I know and have seen over the years that exited my organization from the military side just came back and did the same job
Yeah.
as a civilian, which I get. Like, there's a lot of reasons why people do that. Sometimes, especially if you're up in like the DC area, it's just easy to, if you already get family there, kids in school, it just makes
Yeah.
sense. But for in my calculus, I didn't want to come back and do the same job um, as a civilian, because I was like, well, why did I retire then?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you know, I mean, there are advantages, obviously, to being a civilian in the government, because you don't have to worry about deployments necessarily. Or you can
Or
deploy as a
or
civilian,
getting
but I mean,
fired,
it's your
really.
choice. Yeah. You have a lot more protections as a civilian agent than you would as a military agent. Um, but yeah, like I felt like I wanted to get out and do something different. And I had a boss when I did an out of command job as an inspector general prior to going to headquarters. That he told me one day, he was really a great guy. In fact, I had him officiate at my retirement ceremony. He told me one day, he's like, if you do want to do something different, you need to do it while you're in your early 40s, because he said every year as you stack on into your 40s, you become less desirable if you're trying to make a jump
Did
outside of,
something, yeah.
yeah, something different. So that really weighed heavily on me too, and probably helped make that decision easy to be like, oh, it's time. Let me
Yeah.
punch, because I want to do something different. I want to get out there and yeah, find a find a new career, find a new way to do things, and I'm glad I did. So
Okay.
that's my, as the grand thumb says, your dad advice. Just
Yeah.
pop out your 40s while you can, if you want to make a jump like I did to something different.
Okay. Did you find the services like TAPS or Boots to Business and others beneficial for your transition?
It was helpful in some ways. So I had to do a virtual TAPS class the first time, because that was all that was offered, because it was still
Yeah.
COVID, whatever. Um, but I did Hire for Heroes, which is a
Okay.
nonprofit, and I found that really helpful. And like my data points on that are at the headquarters. I knew two guys that were retiring. One was a chief, one was a colonel, and they worked together. And they had a bet of one of them was going to pay $3,000 or something like that to a service to help write their resume, and the other was going to use Hire for Heroes to write their resume, because Hire for Heroes will do it for free.
Right.
And then they would compare results at the end. And when they compared results at the end, they realized that the resumes, for the most part, were identical.
Okay.
So that was like, well, heck, I don't want to spend $3,000 if I don't have to.
Right.
So I used Hire for Heroes, and my first counselor with them. So I kind of started with them early, about maybe 2.5 years before retiring or hitting the button, but just kind of reaching out, just kind of baby steps of what's out there. My first counselor was great. Like, he would constantly reach out on me and check on me, and he really tried to add like a personal touch to it. And then he departed, and the next counselor I got really left something to be desired.
Okay.
But it didn't matter so much at that point, because the other guy had set me up so well on like how to
Right.
build a resume, tailor it for different jobs. I wasn't necessarily butthurt. But I will say, if someone does have experience, you never know who you're going to get, right? Like,
Right.
sometimes there's people out there that are just phoning it in. But I definitely felt like my second counselor was phoning it in, especially the time that she called me twice in one day within an hour, asking me the same questions. And I'm like, you're just going through your checklist, aren't you? Like we talked earlier. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's like you're checking that box that you reached out to your folks today or whatever, but you made a mistake, just called me twice, and you clearly didn't even listen to me the first time we talked.
Okay.
So, but I will credit again that organization. That's not to disparage the organization. It's just reality, right? Like that.
Yeah.
Those are my experiences working with them. But the TAPS program, I did go to one. They did offer one in person. So I did one virtual, and then I went to one in person, and it was good. I mean, there's like little things that you can pick up on during TAPS. But what was kind of strange is they didn't have a lot of like top tier organizations show up. Like,
Okay.
they always have like a few companies show up or whatever. And, it'd be like Starbucks and whatever. And it's like, well, okay.
I'm 40.
Really,
I don't
like,
want to be a barista.
well, but not only that, but even if you were just, a young airman 4 years in, I think you're qualified for more than Starbucks for most
Yeah.
AFSC.
100%.
So bring in, like, if you have to, just go with the standbys, like Boeing or Lockheed or whatever, Raytheon. Have some of those folks come in, and I think that just speaks to wherever you're at, like whoever they can get for the day. So I get scheduling happens sometimes, but that was a little bit surprising that they didn't have better representation from some of the folks. I think military folks who are easily qualified to roll into. But SkillBridge, I did SkillBridge as well, and I understand that at least when I was leaving, the program was kind of in some upheaval, that they locked it down to a certain number of employers when it used to kind of be a very wide
wide
berth.
net. You go find the person, get them to sign the thing, and then boom, you're in. Now it's gotten much more curtailed. Yeah.
Now, I understand, though, as I was leaving, that there are some of the organizations that are approved are, how can I put this? Like, sort of like headhunter organizations. Like, you can still say you want to go work at the local factory down the street. You can apply for some of the SkillBridge organizations that will sort of like farm you out to that factory. So there's still like a roundabout way to get what you want, but I don't know more than that. That's just kind of like what I picked up on as I was getting out. But my experience with SkillBridge was positive in that my leadership, they were a little hesitant to let me go, but if you just make the argument that, well, I'm going to be gone in 4 months anyway when I start terminal, so either you let me go now, or you deal with it. Then you're going to have to deal with having me not in place here.
Yeah,
soon.
me not here anymore.
Yeah, so I think that for the most part, if folks out there are trying to do SkillBridge, if you couch it that way, that I think the organization will survive when I'm not here in 6 months, because they're going to have to anyway. Like a lot of times that clicks with commanders, like, oh yeah, okay.
Well, also, like, I hear it this way, like, and maybe this is the enlisted brain talking, but like me and my friends, we always look at it and be like, Dude, we could literally PCS tomorrow and the shop's going to have to figure it out.
Yeah,
I could deploy, the shop's going to have to figure it out. I could die, the
exactly.
shop's going to have to figure it out. Like,
Yeah,
you will be missed, but we're not stopping for you. The machine is always grinding.
yeah.
It is always grinding. Usually our souls into dust, but like it's always grinding. It's always moving forward. You can PCS, you can deploy, you can, pass away, you can do whatever. Like they're still going to have to do the thing. Like
Yeah,
that's a realization, whether you're there for it or not. Like they may love that you're there because you know how systems work or you're really good at your job. Somebody else is going to have to get good at that process because it's going to
yeah.
happen. It's going to happen. And I think we see that a lot when like people take leave or like with maternity leave or paternity leave, right? Like with the new paternity leave with fathers getting, I think it's 12 weeks of paternity leave that they get within the first year. Like
Mhm.
they're not used to dudes being out of the shop for 12 weeks. They
Yeah,
can take it all up front, they can space it out, they can do however they want to do it. Like they're not used to that. So I think like, oh, you can't do that. Like we're gonna be down and we're gonna be out and we're not gonna have like, no, sorry, dude. Like this is happening.
yeah.
Um, so you said that you started preparing to get out like 2.5 years in advance.
Yeah. So I knew that it was coming and that I wanted to do it. And yeah, reaching out for Hire for Heroes really kind of helped set the foundation.
Okay. So you
Um,
say that was like the launching off point was contacting Hire for Heroes, like and starting that whole process. Like, did you know the direction you wanted to go when you got out? Like move, stay, go back to home or record, like any of that stuff? Or was it just like, hey,
well,
I'm retiring, like where do I start?
yeah, well, I definitely wanted to get back to my home of record because I was in Virginia at the time, and I wanted to get to a state that doesn't have a state income tax like
Yeah,
Texas. So,
yeah,
so yeah, I wanted to get home, but I also didn't necessarily want to uproot right away. Like, oh, let's find a job, and that's something like that always kind of I found curious about Skill Bridge because you can do that, right? Like you can go find a Skill Bridge in-person opportunity outside of your state or outside of your
yeah,
area. And to me, that's like, well, I hope you're living in a hotel or some easy lodging during that period because what if you get to that Skill Bridge opportunity and you don't like it,
yeah.
and they're
That
like,
actually
oh,
happened with a previous, well, this episode will come out before theirs, but that's what happened with them. They went somewhere, checked it out, and they're like, not a good fit.
yeah. And I ended up just to close the loop on it. I didn't end up taking a job with that Skillbridge company.
Mhm.
But yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, just
Yeah,
something different. But yeah, like I wanted to have something in place before I decided to uproot, my wife to go someplace. So yeah, that I knew I wanted to be in Texas. I just I didn't know what I wanted to do. And one of the big complications I think is that I have my fingers in a lot of pots. Like I do a
right.
lot of different things. Like I
Yeah,
love cinema stuff. I love like public presentation or like public speaking and things. And I love shooting. And I love I did I did a job for a while actually while I was in active duty is running social media marketing for a collectibles company, like a movie collectibles company.
okay,
They unfortunately went under during COVID, so I wasn't able to continue.
right.
I was able to transition out and do a time job with them, but I do all these different things. And I tried to reflect that originally in my early resumes until a buddy's like, dude, you need to pick something. You need to kind of pare it down a little bit to something because he said the problem is I know you do a lot of things and I know you do a lot of things really well, but to an employer they don't know where to put you.
Yeah,
They're like, well, what is this guy? And so that took some realization for me that I thought, well, hell, I'm a jack of all trades. I can do all these
yeah,
things, and that thing too about you can add to your resume or when you're talking to an employer that say, hey, many times throughout my career, the Air Force has put me in places in jobs that I was not prepared for, I was not trained for, but through on-the-job training and through my own research and all that, I learned how to do the job, and I ended up doing it really well, and I excelled in that position until the next time that they moved me
that
again. So
move exactly.
you can say that you have that innate flexibility to learn something brand new and run with it and exceed expectations. Um, yeah, like I had to kind of focus on something because otherwise, no one was ever gonna decide to roll with me
Right.
if they couldn't figure out where to fit me.
Right.
And the sad reality I learned from the transition point that I did not well, I should have expected this because I saw it on the government side, but if you don't know somebody at a company, it's really hard to get an interview.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
that was gonna be one of my questions is what was like the biggest surprise about your transition, or what did you wish you did differently?
yeah, I don't know if I could have done anything differently. I mean, I applied for hundreds of jobs, and I had some interviews early on, and I was like, oh, this will be a cakewalk. And I had a interview with eBay, and it was actually for collectibles authentication, which I'm like, that's cool. Like, I
Yeah.
did collectibles social media marketing, and like I have like a compliance background, authentication, checking
Yeah.
evidence or whatever in a way. So I was like, I can see how it combines, and it was going to be remote, which I was like, oh, that's even better. I could do that anywhere. And I got through the first interview with like the HR recruiter or whatever, and then they set up a second interview with the department manager or the department head or whatever, and that was eye opening. She was probably late 20 something, early 30 something, Bay Area person that probably has not ever left the Bay Area and has just been
Gotcha.
working in that little slice of the world. And when she's asked me about my leadership experiences, my job experiences, I'm going through all these things like I was managing this team here and doing this thing there, and um, you know, she couldn't process it. Like
Yeah.
that was the interpretation I got. Like it was just all over her head. And I really tried to dumb it down too, like to non-military terms. But I think to her point in life, like she's like, why is this guy always leaving these jobs if he's so good?
Right. Not
You know,
understanding that we don't have a choice.
yeah, yeah. And it's funny. I talked to a JAG that ran into that same problem. That he was trying to. He was retiring, and he applied for a civilian law firm, and they thought he was a loser because they're like, oh, you keep moving every 3 years, like you don't even stay in one legal position. Like, are you that bad of a lawyer? And just like
Yeah.
them not understanding, and so that was eye opening too. Is like you have to really communicate that to your potential employers that um, you're not leaving because you're a problem child. Like you said, you're kind of forced to leave, and this is the career path. And what that gives you is a very unique set of experiences, and that the average public just doesn't get. And so you have to convey that somehow, and hopefully, the person you're talking to the other end
Gets it.
has a worldview where they can understand. Like, holy cow! I had dinner one night. I was in it was a gun run, and I was having dinner in um, just outside of Atlanta. I can't think of where it was, but at this restaurant we ended up at, there was a Belgian guy seated next to me, and I could tell he was from Belgium. We started talking, and he was telling me he ran a company. I think it was like Delta. I was like, Delta, like the airline? He's like, no, it's an engineering company. And he was saying that he specifically tries to hire military veterans for his job, for engineering job. And I'm like, well, do they have engineering experience? He goes, no. He's like, I just teach them what they need to know. He's like, I know with you guys being in the military, you've done all these jobs that you weren't prepared for, and you just figured it out. He's
Yep.
like, if you can read, I can teach you this job, and
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
wow. But that was really cool to meet someone like that was not in the military, but knew the value of a veteran or what a veteran could bring, and that was tempting, right? I was like, man,
Yeah.
maybe I should try to go work with this guy.
Hey, you got his
But
name?
yeah, yeah. All I remember is like Delta Engineering or something like that in Atlanta. So if anyone's looking for a job, that maybe someone
So
to reach out to. But I don't remember his name.
so what do you think the key to a successful transition is?
Um, have your VA in order for one.
Okay.
That's a big thing. I think people, especially if you've only done a few years in the military and you're young, you think to yourself like, oh, I don't need the VA or whatever. And I'm having friends now that just did a few years reaching back out to me now. They're like, hey, I'm going to apply for a VA. And what I learned at TAPS was that, after your first year of separation, it gets infinitely harder to
Yep.
have a successful VA package put together.
So we have a civilian in our office, and he literally just said that. He's like, if you wait till you get out to document it, he's like,
Yeah.
it's 10 times harder to get VA compensation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, just you've got to be on top of that. If you think you have any issues, or if there's any chronic things that you've been seeing for, or even, whether you did 4 years or 20 years or 30 years or whatever, you've got to make sure that you talk about that you put that in your package and submit before your first year of separation is up. Ideally, submit it before you get out. But yeah, having your VA in order, I think is really big, because the care that you can get from the VA, I've already been using them pretty regularly, is important, and it's also fairly easy to find. I mean, they have community care. You don't necessarily need to live near a VA facility to do it. So there are aspects out there, but it's very helpful to do. So I would say VA Foundation is the first thing that you should set up, or start making strides to complete before you separate. And then like I did, like if you have my wife kept us afloat after I retired. I mean, I was getting a retirement paycheck, but she worked for USO, and she was able to have a steady income coming in until I could find something that was what I wanted to do. And I felt bad. I had to uproot her from that job, and she hasn't been able to do that job where we live now, just because of just numbers and position availability. But having someone to lean on was very helpful during that transition. So that's another thing. If you have that opportunity to lean on, or if you saved your money really well, you're independently wealthy or whatever, that helps keep you from taking a job that maybe you wouldn't otherwise take. If you find yourself in dire circumstances, that you might end up taking that Starbucks job or whatever. Not to say that there's nothing wrong with Starbucks, but it's like, if you think you could do so much more, then hold out for as long as you can, if possible, because you shouldn't sell yourself short.
Yeah. What do you think the best piece of advice you received during your transition was?
Best piece of advice. Well, the VA stuff, just have your VA stuff in order. And know that MRIs count so much more than X-rays.
Okay.
Was critical. That's a really big piece as well.
Okay. That's a solid piece of advice. What would you tell service members that are separating or retiring to do before they get out? And it sounds like get things documented as one, but
get things documented. Have copies of your performance reports, and which especially try to get a last performance report if you can, because some employers actually ask for that. So a lot of people just kind of phone in that last year. They're doing appointments and retirement activities or whatever, and but still try to get something on paper. It doesn't even have to be the greatest one ever. It doesn't have to be the one that you're working towards to get that awards package or whatever, but just have something that you can point to, like, I was still working my last year.
Yeah. Okay. For a wrap up, do you have any goals for 2024, whether it be personal or professional wise? Like on the personal side, like attend more USPSA matches or fun runs or gun runs, or hell, now get to an NRL hunter match.
Yeah. Actually my shooting has really subsided since I would say since we moved down to Texas last year in the spring, largely because it's been a goal to find a house, and we found a house last summer, but we've had a very slow start. This is the slowest settling we've ever done, which I guess is something to say that we've always rented, we've never bought. So we can finally make this house our own, but we didn't get our stuff until September, and then we were having some renovations done to the house, and then we got very discombobulated in late March that there was a leak in the house. 10 years ago when the builder built this place, They put a screw through the wall that punctured a pipe. This pipe sealed around the screw. And after 10 years, that screw finally disintegrated. The upshot of the deal is that approximately 35% of our floor was destroyed, but it's the builder's responsibility, and we're still in the original builder's warranty. So we got a new floor. It's still not done yet. There's still some like the baseboards and stuff they got to put on, but that kind of caused us to almost have to PCS again because we had a pot on the driveway. We had all the crap in our living room, dining room, and guest bedroom put in other rooms, and yeah. So my goal really right now is to finish this house. I still got talk about the theater. The theater is 80% done, 85% done. I'm still waiting some acoustic panels to show up, and then I've got to get an audio calibrator to come up and calibrate the audio. So there's still some pieces on that, but yeah, like my focus lately has been just to try to get this house settled, and I feel guilty if I spend my weekends going out shooting. I have done a few matches, so they do submachine gun matches.
There's priorities. There's seasons.
Yeah. So I'm able to try to do like maybe one match a month. And I just did a course in Ohio with my cousin that was fantastic, an MP5 course. But for the most part, I'm trying to spend my time or budget my time towards house settling. Once I get the house settled, it's game on, and I'll be back in like a regular swing of things and shooting and doing what I can and trying to find out, what's available in the broader area for competitions. But that's my goal right now, is to sell this damn house.
Fantastic. Closing thoughts or shout outs to either people that you've worked with or shooting gear that you run that you just think is awesome. Final thoughts and shout outs.
Okay. 2, Roger Shooting School. If you've never heard of it, you should look it up. It's a change your life kind of event or course. They have many courses to go there, but the handgun course, especially the advanced course, is life changing. I've never shot so fast or accurately in my life, and just next level shooting. You come away with such a high when you go there. And I can't say enough good things about that school. And then the other thing would be the Air Force Wounded Warrior Program. Big misconception out there, even amongst people that qualify for it, is that, I'm not hurt enough. I don't want to take a spot away from someone. I'm not missing a leg. I've just got neck injuries or TBI.
I literally had that conversation last week with one of your athletes. So yeah, it's true. It's a big misconception. And when I was in IG for a while, and I would go out to geographically separated units, talk about IG stuff, and I'd always tack on at the end about the Air Force Wounded Warrior Program, because a lot of the TACP community that I service get hurt a lot. Yeah, and they just suck it up, and it's like, well, no, I mean, if you qualify for the program, and if you have a recovery care coordinator, go do it. Go try it out. And it's not only just a sports track they do; they also have like job fair type stuff, like transition stuff there, and just general recovery services. And the camps are so helpful for people. But yeah, misconception time and time again is that I don't want to take a spot away from someone more hurt than me. And it's like, well, no, if you qualify, you qualify. Just go do it. You'll have a great time. And one of the things that's really neat is that even if you go there thinking you're not hurt that bad, maybe you can help somebody that's more hurt. Right. Just your presence there, just talking through things or finding people with relatable experiences. It's very therapeutic. Whether it's for you or maybe you end up helping somebody else, it's so valuable. And I can't say enough things about it. They do sports camps or care events, as they call them, throughout the country in great places, and it culminates into this thing called Warrior Games, which is taking place next month in Orlando. Also, there's a thing called a spinoff of it called Invictus Games. It gets a lot more publicity. They don't do any shooting in Invictus Games, unfortunately. But so I don't go to those. But it's a really great program. Awesome. And so the thing I always stopped on, or when I did my little spiel on it, was like, whether maybe you're listening to this right now and you don't qualify, but maybe one day you're the supervisor or the friend of somebody that does, and it's important to let them know that it exists, because a lot of people don't know about it, or they think it's the Wounded Warrior Project, which is very similarly named, but it's completely different. That's a charity. Air Force Wounded Warrior Program is an official Air Force entity, DoD entity. Every service has an equivalent. So yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us on this episode of another GD podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast as it helps us grow our listenership and exposes us to an ever-growing followership and fan base. If you have suggestions for a guest, such as Robert, because I got your name from somebody else that knows I do a podcast, let me know. You can email me. My email is guy.demarco.84@gmail, or you can follow us at Instagram at another GD podcast, all one word. Till next time, keep your powder dry, and we'll see you at the range.